Hi, and welcome to this energetic arts training session. Today's topic is breath gearing, and this is quite a large topic. It's quite an important one, and it's probably one of the key topics that you're going to need to really not only understand but to practice and get skilled at if you're going to continue your practice into, say, the next webinar, which is on the breath, or the bliss breath, or the out of body breath, because you're going to want to understand breath gearing and breath patterns to be able to charge your body up to do the breath, to come back out of the breath, and to reintegrate certain frequencies into your life. Now, if you have any questions, as usual, you can just put them in the chat feed. I'm going to sort of see if I can free flow through this and see if I can condense this topic down into an hour, hour and a half, something like that. And I'm going to give you a few basic breaths to work with. I'm going to give you some concepts, and then I'm going to tell you some stories about how they relate based on my experience. This isn't to impress you or to talk about me, but to give you some framework to be able to understand the applications of this breath and the importance of these breath patterns. So first of all, let's just start off very general, and basically we're going to talk about how important breathing is. I mean, the joke that I always use is, there was a scientific study that was very conclusive. It was replicated all over the world, and they worked out that lack of breathing can lead to death. So we want to make sure we're breathing in a correct way. And if you talk to any free divers or any people who are water-based, watermen, water people, they'll tell you just how important breathing is to be able to hold your breath and things like that. So let's all hope that the technology works this time and it's not glitchy and all the information gets through, because it's such an important topic, and I've been doing a lot of study at the moment to be able to articulate what I've embodied and what I've experienced, so I can hand it over to you guys to start working with. And so basically there's 4 key breaths that I was introduced to through Systema, which is a Russian martial art, which was there to help with recovery, which was there to help reduce stress, which was there to bring stress levels down. And the 4 basic breaths was just a normal relaxed breath. So this is usually breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, or out through the mouth. You usually do this when you're watching TV, or you're reading a book, or you're just, meditating, staring into space. You're just relaxed. You're breathing normally in a natural rhythmic cycle with whatever your body is doing in a relaxed state. From there, we jump into another breath, and these aren't in any particular order, by the way, and you can use them in combination and in different sequences depending on what you're doing. The next breath is a clearing breath, and usually see this in yoga classes where people go or something like that. You don't actually need to make any sound, but it's a deep breath. You're rinsing the body out, and you're clearing out any tension or toxins or negativity, let's put it that way. From there, we move into another breath gear, or another breath pattern, which is usually used when you're under more physical, mental, emotional stress, and that is a burst breath. And that's a short breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I'm just getting messages here from people not being able to connect, so I really hope that we can get the replay here. So it's a short breath, and it's in through the nose, out through the mouth, and it's like a first or second gear in a car. You use this when the load on the body or the mind or the emotions is quite stressful or heavy or intense, and you need to flood the system with air, oxygen, clean out toxins quickly, lactic acid. You need to bring it back into equilibrium and harmony as quickly as possible. And it sounds a little something like this. And finish off with a clearing breath, for example. Switch gears back down into a relaxing breath, and you're restored. So we used to use this breath a lot in conditioning, strength and conditioning training. If we'd received a blow or a strike that, you know, rattled us, and we needed to get our faculties back, get control back over our body because it was going off on a tangent or into, you know, it was freaking out psychologically. And so this is a very useful breath to bring you out of stress and to bring your heart rate down and to calm you down quickly. The next breath is a blast breath, and this uses a lot of energy. So you charge up the body and you just burst out, blast out. It sounds like a boxer's breath. You'll hear boxers doing this. And it uses a lot of energy. So if you have a real negative thought or angry thought, a frustrating thought, you can charge it up and release it really quickly, and that'll start to bring you back down and relax you. And it has an effect on the field around you. Of course, your state, your breathing patterns, your energy has an effect on the field around you. So these are just 4 basic breaths. These are like 4 gears, okay, just to get you going. But the real idea behind the lesson tonight, the webinar tonight, is to get you to understand that everything that you're doing based on who you are, where you're going, what your desired outcome is, and what movement or what action or non-action you need to take to synchronize with that potential, is all based in some kind of energetic frequency or signature. And so just like everything we've ever done, every thought, every movement, every emotion, every action has involved our breath, either breathing, holding the breath, or having no breath in the body. Everything that we've done, are doing, and will do has some kind of breathing pattern or breath gear associated with it. And sometimes the timing has been out, the pattern has been off, and it hasn't quite meshed, and we'll go into stress. And other times when you're in the flow, you know, the breath pattern, the movement, the mind, body, emotions, actions are all aligned, and you get that feeling of flow, that feeling of bliss, and ecstasy towards whatever it is you're doing, and you can find it anywhere, doing anything, okay? So when your thoughts, words, actions, emotions, and your breathing is aligned and it's a match, you're going to shoot yourself up into higher states of consciousness. If you noticed any time, and you should pay attention to this from now on, is that if any time you're under stress, or you're freaked out, or you're in some kind of pain, chances are your body is tense, your breathing is tight and shallow, if you're breathing at all. And as soon as you acknowledge that and you pay attention to that, you can start to breathe and relax and start to get everything start to kick back into gear again. and the body starts to calm down. You start to feel relief. You'll start to feel your energy flowing again. You'll feel your energy field expand. And when your energy field expands, you'll start to feel more and more relaxed. And you'll breathe more relaxed. And you'll calm down even more. So I know everyone wants to go towards the bliss breath, the bliss experience, the mystical experience, and let me tell you, it's just there. It's waiting for you to tune into it and to be in the right state of mind, the right emotional state, the right physical state, and the right breath pattern linked up with it. And in the meantime, these breath patterns can be very valuable when dealing with emotions or thought patterns or pain in the body, tension in the body. There's impeding and not allowing you to implode that energy into a bliss consciousness state. So a few stories now, just to give you a bit more idea. Because what I really want for you out of this is not just to learn the 4 breaths and then learn the breath next week to pop you in and out, but I want you to be able to understand how to uncover breath patterns and breath signatures, breath gears in basically everything that you do. And so to understand that, you need to know what it looks like when you're out of sync, and you need to know what it looks like when you're in sync. And I need to give you some parameters, some stories, so you can understand the depth of its application and its efficacy. So the first story is goes back a few years ago, and I was working in my business, working on the kids' camps. And we weren't on camp at this stage. We were in between camps, and we were doing training for all the camp leaders. And so I sent them all off to first aid and to get a bronze medallion, just because we had water activities, and I wanted to make sure every leader was able to save a life if they had to, and that they had some kind of basic training. So if in an event, a kid got into deep water, we were able to pull out a rescue and avoid a bad situation. And so one of the guys that was working with me, who's been training with me a long time, he doesn't train with me much anymore because I travel so much, and he's a master in his own right. He was a parkour instructor, one of the probably the most underrated parkour instructors at least in Australia, if not the world. And he's very nondescript. You could walk right past him and you'd never know. But he was very skilled on the land, like very fit, could outrun pretty much everybody I've ever known. Extremely fit, extremely strong, and was able to do things that only probably a handful of people in the world could do. But when it came to the water, he really struggled. He had to redo the bronze medallion test because he just ran out of gas halfway through the qualification swim, which is 400 meters. You have to demonstrate 4 different styles of stroke, and you have to do it within, I think it's 14 minutes. Okay, so to anyone who's a practice swimmer, it's not a big deal, but for people who just swim recreationally or not at all, it's quite an undertaking. Okay, so long story short, he ended up failing the test the first time. He got the option to redo it, which he jumped at straight away. And he came to me right after the test and was like shocked couldn't understand how he'd not been able to get through the 400 meter uh, swim, because he'd just ran a marathon like the week before, and he did it no sweat. And he said, "Look, I really need your help working on my breath patterns and my breath gearing during swimming, so I can get through this test, get the bronze medallion, get on camp, and I know I'm set. If anything goes wrong, the shit hits the fan, I can jump in the water and I can save a life." And he was a very dedicated camp leader, and the kids loved him. So, of course, I said yes, and we spent a good couple of days just working on different patterns of stroke, different swimming strokes, getting efficiency in the actual movement, and then matching the breath pattern to the movement. Okay, and the whole emphasis the whole time was to be as relaxed as possible while doing the action within the constraints of the test. And so after working out what the breathing pattern was, and it's something you really need to sort of investigate and feel out. Obviously, he went back, he smashed the test, no problem, got his bronze medallion, and we're off to the races when it came to running the kids' camps. So the thing we're looking for in that situation was, how do we get into a state where the body's active, it's ready to go, and it's charged up, but it's not overloading, it's not redlining like in your car. You've got that, rev meter that goes that way, I'm guessing, if you're watching, and you don't, it doesn't go into red line and blow the engine. Okay, you stay under in that sweet spot where you're getting maximum speed, maximum power, and maximum efficiency, and you've got minimum load on the body and the psyche and the emotions. Now, there was another story on the other extreme of another guy I was training with. He was also in the parkour community, and this happened a couple of years earlier. And the guy I was talking about, he was there too. So the three of us were there. We were on a beach in North Queensland, up on Magnetic Island, Tamworth, and we were there for the Australian Parkour Association National Gathering. It was the first one of its kind that wasn't in the city. And we went onto the island, we picked a natural environment and stayed in a, what are they called? It was a campsite, basically, a recreation campsite. And with, facilities and all that sort of stuff. The kind that you go to when you're at school, on school camp, right? And so not only did we have that, we had a bunch of activities, and we were doing all those sorts of things, and we were going to be in the water and out of the water and rock hopping and running, and it was quite hot. So there were a lot of factors at play that already put the body into states of stress that were going to have to be managed. And so we thought we'd go scout the area, the three of us. And as we did that, we decided we were all hanging to get in the water and do some diving, free diving, and just get into that crystal clear water, because at the time we were living in Melbourne, and Melbourne's not very clear, and it's cold and it's miserable. The water there, even when it's hot, the water's bloody cold. And so when we got up to North Queensland, we were like ecstatic that we were going to get in some warm, clear water. Now, it was stinger time, and if you're from Australia, you know what that means. It means that it's a dangerous time to be in the water, because all the things that like to bite and sting you and poison you in the water were, either on their just entering or just at the tail end of their breeding season. So there were, there's a high probability that you'll get stung by something. But being macho guys, we were like, yeah, we'll be fine. Went into the water. We were swimming in there for about an hour, and it was a little bit hairy because we could see a lot of things that could quite easily have ruined the day. And we got all the way out to the end of the swim, and we were a little bit tired. We were focusing on our breathing and things like that during the swim. But we were getting out of the water, and we were walking out, and we'd made it. Two of us had made it onto the sand, onto the beach, and I felt this big sigh of relief almost. And I turned around, and my other friend was in ankle deep water. And as he took his third step from the sand, he went, ah! I think I stepped on a sharp rock. And he was a European guy, so he wasn't quite up to speed on how dangerous, the wildlife can be in Australia when you're up, especially in North Queensland. And me and the other guy, we looked at each other like, oh, this could be really fucked up. Like, we could be in trouble here. We just better be on guard, on alert, on standby, just in case something, he's been stung by something. Because we were quite far away from the campsite, and the campsite was quite far away from the local town. And we didn't know the area very well, so we didn't know how close by help was going to be. So we paused for a second. We were really tense. We weren't breathing. We were holding our breath. We were really concerned for a second there, because we'd heard we got as soon as we land there, we got told all the stories of what can happen if you get stung and how bad it can be. And we started walking back towards the campsite, and we're about 3 kilometers from the campsite. I don't know what that is in miles. And he said, oh, this really hurts. My foot feels like it's burning. And we're like, oh shit, here we go. And so I turned to the other guy. All I did was nodded to him. He knew exactly what was up. And because he was the runner of the group, he's the marathon runner, he just took off, started running back towards the campsite to get help. And I put my arm around him, and put his arm around me. We started limping back down the beach, and progressively the tension and the pain was starting to move from his foot to his ankle, from his ankle to his calf, from his calf to his knee, from his knee to his thigh. By this stage, we're about maybe 50 meters down the beach. And then when it got to his upper thigh, he started to freak out, like most guys would. And thankfully, we'd been training a lot on breath work, and we'd been doing a lot of Systema and a lot of strike absorption previously. And I'll never forget this. And he said, I can't walk anymore. And he went and he sat down, and he started to basically scream. It's like, ah. And he was grabbing the top of his thigh, like trying to stop it from going up any further. And we knew that if the toxin reaches the heart, or it can spread everywhere, and if you don't calm yourself down and the mind redlines, you can go into shock, you can lose consciousness, and from there, you just don't know what can happen. And so he said to me, Brett, I think you're going to have to fireman carry me back. And I was like, oh, okay, yep, let's do this. I picked him up, put him over my shoulder, and we trained in this before. We trained fireman carry and, practiced in our strength and conditioning training, but it was all pretty short. It was like 10, 15, 20 meters maximum, sprinting backwards and forwards, and you switch and you take it in turns, and then you switch partners, and you only do that for a couple of rounds, and then you're on to the next exercise. So anyway, I had to pick him up, put him on my shoulders, and run with him in deep, deep sand. I don't think I've ever experienced any sand like this before in my life. And I started running him back down the beach towards the opening, towards the campsite, and it was at least 300 meters. It was a long, long way to be running in deep sand with a guy on your shoulders, and one who's on the verge of panic. Okay, so I'm holding him, I'm running with him. There's all this stress going on from that. He's going through whatever he's going through with the sting. I can hear him wincing and rolling around and screaming on the back of me in pain, and practicing his breathing as best he can in between, screaming out in pain. And here I am running with him and trying my best to get into the right breathing pattern so I can do this exercise and get him to safety before he goes unconscious. And so my brain's calculating distance, depth of sand, energy output, breathing pattern, oxygen intake, carbon dioxide outtake, lactic acid clearing. It's all going on all the time, and the brain is maxed out. I'm breathing just to keep my brain calm. And let me tell you, it's not an experience I would recommend anyone going through, because there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders in those situations. Anyway, I finally get him back to the edge of the sand where we see, thankfully, I don't know how this happened, by the way, the only time in the whole year we didn't even know it was happening. There was some kind of race triathlon on, where the bike component of the race was actually a mountain bike leg, where they actually ride along the sand on the beach. So we get up, we see all these mountain bikers coming through, and I yell out to the first person I see, who was a marshal. I said, I've got this guy on my back. We think he's been stung. Where's a medic? Where's an ambulance? We need one right now. And so he gets on the radio, calls them in, and thankfully, just as the ambulance came in, the other guy who ran for help got help from the campsite, brought more people over to carry him further if we needed to. I met my objective, my goal, and I collapsed, exhausted. Now, before I go on with the breath pattern of that, just on a side note, this is useful information if you ever find yourself stung by anything in the water. Hot water, warm water neutralizes the enzyme, breaks it down, and all of that pain, all that toxin just disappears like it never happened. Okay, it's an amazing technology, biological technology. The hole in this guy's toe where he got pricked was like a needle. It was a tiny little spot of red. You could barely see it. This toxin went into the bloodstream, went up into the brain, told the brain that it was experiencing more pain than what it really was. It found the pain dial and turned it all the way up. Um, it's a fascinating biological weapon that's naturally evolved. You gotta remember, things in the water have been evolving for however millions of years, so it's pretty advanced stuff, right down to a biological, cellular, neurological, neurotoxin. So, as you can see, it was quite a psychologically stressful situation, even one to remember. Which brings me to my next point. And this is where we tie some of the loops up. Psychological stress, psychological trauma, mental, emotional trauma, even though it's not happening right now, when you activate the memory of it, like I just did, there is a spike in the emotions. The emotions get spiked. It's like a key. The brain creates a memory or a thought form. Thought form goes into the body, into the endocrine system, which produces the chemicals, and the pituitary gland produces the chemicals of that event. The chemicals get released into the body, and the body begins to feel the emotion of the event like it was happening all over again. Maybe not with the degree and intensity, depending on how much charge of energy around that event you've released through breathing, which is a really good technique for that. I recommend burst and blast breaths for really tough emotions and tough mental patterns. And clearing breaths when you feel a bit more relaxed, a bit more calm, just to help your body restore itself. So when this spike happens, sometimes you're not aware, sometimes you are. If you're aware, that's good. It's almost like the old illustration in the Wild West movies of the stagecoach that's out of control, running towards the ravine, and there's someone in the back like flopping around. I think Back to the Future 3 was a good example. Clara's in the back flopping around. Oh, help me, help me, help me. And this thing's charging towards the ravine. It's about, if something isn't done soon, this thing's going to go straight off the edge and crash. So of course the hero's riding along, trying to grab this lead horse if it can only get the reins. There's so much turmoil. Finally grabs the reins, reels in. Hopefully there's enough time to stop. Yes, there's enough time to stop. Turn the horses around, turn the stagecoach around, remove the danger, back into the safety zone, and you're safe again. No harm, no foul. Just got to deal with the almost, could have, would have, maybe, but didn't happen. And so with that, in terms of the emotional spike or the thought form, when you can catch it, or you catch it in the body, you start feeling stressed. Okay, you need to start breathing, catch up with the emotion, slow it down, get ahead of the emotion with the breath, and then begin to redirect into a more relaxed state. Okay, so a good example of how this could work, using the stagecoach as the example of the flow of tension. You get to that peak, you catch the reins on the lead horse, you realize what's going on, emotional, mental, physical level. You start to burst breathe. If that's not working, you go into a blast breath. back into a burst breath. Get ahead. Once you get ahead, start to turn. Slow down. Come to a stop. Back to a relaxed breath. And it's over. Back in control of yourself again. Okay. A really good example that I've seen illustrated in Sherlock Holmes, the second one. Robert Downey Jr., Jude Law. The other guys escape me. You know, the lady from what's her name from Girl Who Kicked Over the Hornet's Nest. Oh, great series. Anyway, villains chasing Sherlock Holmes and Watson and I can't remember her name, but you know what I'm talking about now. Through the forest, there's this big gun battle going on. They're escaping on the train. The villain, arch nemesis, henchman, whatever, chasing them. He's a sniper and a marksman. They're all been running like crazy. The adrenaline's going through the roof. Bombs have been going off. Bullets are flying, and he's chasing them down. They're about to escape on the train. Everyone's getting on the train. He's got enough time for one shot to pick one of the group away, and he gets into his perch, lines up the gun, and of course he can't fire the gun accurately because his heart's pounding, his adrenaline's going, and any little tiny minute movement is going to knock the bullet off several inches. You miss the target completely. So what does he do? He does it's like a blast clearing combination breath. So he goes and in that pause in between breaths, he takes his shot, hits the target, and the heroes lose one of the characters in the film. They go on, and you know the rest of the story. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Lots of action and adventure. And so you want to see how the villain gets his just deserves for that action towards the heroes as well. Anyway, that aside, you're starting to get the idea, I hope, of getting your breath engaged in as a lead, as a guide, as a steering mechanism to get your thoughts, emotions, and your body back under, not control, under relaxation again. Restored. You want to be able to restore the body, restore the emotions, restore the psyche back to a neutral, balanced, harmonious state. Now, why is this important when we're talking about doing the bliss breath or the breath next week? Well, because when we're going and moving the energy up and through the body, and for a lot of people, it's never happened to them before, they hit this threshold where the energy's moving up and getting compressed and imploding up through the energy centers and refined further and further. The brain's going into, it's a delta, a theta, delta, alpha, gamma state frequency. It's all moving energy and compressing all the way up inside the body within the space of a meter and a half, so fast that it's going and piercing through the threshold of the speed of light. And there's lots of research through Dan Winter, lots of science, lots of electrical engineering to back this up. It's quite dense, heavy information, but if you need the science behind it, I highly recommend Dan Winter. What's his website? Well, you can find it through theimploder.com and flameinmind.com. I think it's fractalimplosion.com, something like that. But if you Google Dan Winter or YouTube Dan Winter, you'll find it. Fascinating stuff if you can get up to speed with the terminology and the lingo. And so what happens is you pop out of this dimension, you wake up from the matrix, you move out of third dimensional linear timeline space, and you move into time-space multi-dimensional time-space reality, where all these potentials are available to you, and it's a matter of can you navigate and re-enter back into the desired potential reality based on your new energetic signature, which maybe you've never experienced before. And so when you come back into your body, whether it's in this dimension or another one, when your consciousness comes back with the memory of the previous dimension that you've just left, there may be a little bit of processing to do. There may be a little bit of debris that needs to be cleared away so you can restore yourself back to balance and you can integrate your experience and not drive yourself crazy. And so when these emotions come up and when you're finding that you need to reintegrate to your new surroundings, even though they all look the same, even though they're not, you may need to engage different breath patterns and breath gearing to get into sync with your new energetic signature. And so I wanted to do this lesson first, this training session first, and make people aware of this first before we went into doing the breath work, because everyone wants the mystical. Not everyone's willing to go through the preparation to be able to receive it. And even if you're able to get through if you're a clear enough vessel to not impede and implode this energy up through the energy centers and out. And Dan Winter has a much better way of explaining this in super detail that you may have to rewind and rewatch several times just to make sense of how densely compressed and compacted the information is. It's quite incredible how he manages to just skim through it, talk about it so easily and effortlessly, which presupposes he really knows exactly what he's talking about because he's probably done it many, many times. So, here's my disclaimer. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a guru, I'm not a healer. I'm a student, I'm an artist, and if anything, I consider myself an exemplar because I actually practice this myself. And so I'm not out there preaching this to anyone, but I am sharing it with people who are looking, and this is my experience and my experience only. And so if this is useful to you, great. If it's not, don't blame me. Keep researching. Look for ways that are going to assist you in your endeavors towards and beyond this, and happy hunting with your researching and your information gathering and your experience acquisition, let's say. So when these experiences happen, and they don't have to be negative either, they can be so overwhelmingly positive that your belief systems aren't going to be coping, or they're going to be slowing down that accelerated information. It's like, I see it, I've experienced it, I still don't believe it. This is so amazing, I can't believe this has happened to me. And so that can happen when you manifest something for the first time. however big or however small, however practical or useful, doesn't matter. When you know that you've popped into a new dimension and come back into another one where either you've manifested something or it already existed and you navigated through, up and out and back in again into that new timeline, then it's gonna, it's pretty mind blowing. It's pretty awe inspiring. It gives you a whole new perception and a paradigm shift in your mind, in your emotions, in your very being. In your energy signature has changed. You're still you, but you're another version of you, most likely with a lot less impediments, a lot less inhibitions, and a lot less debris, psychic or traumatic debris that you're carrying over from the past. So I think this is a very important area to be able to master. And the way I would recommend you get into this, first learn the basic breaths that I just showed you. There are so many out there. There's Kundalini breaths, which is similar to, or probably the same as what we're going to be doing next week. There is fire breathing. There's a lot of yogic breathing. And here's the thing that I'm learning, that I'm experiencing, is that a lot of this stuff has been worked out already. A lot of this stuff is already out there. You just need to be able to find it, because there's a lot of it's encrypted or encoded, or it's so obscure it's hard to find. And unfortunately, there is a lot of wild gooses out there, and distractions, and wrong turns, and honeypots to just sort of to fool you into thinking that you're on the right track. So you have to use your discernment when you're studying this stuff, and I highly recommend you practice this stuff and then try it out. See if it applies to other things as well. So for example, if you're going to the gym and you're finding yourself getting tired easily, which is stopping you from training and getting to your fitness goals, which is going to help you emotionally and mentally with your psychic goals, then chances are maybe your breathing patterns are off for the exercises that you're doing. And so if you could find that there was a particular energetic signature breath pattern for each and every movement based on who you are and where you are and what you're doing, if you could match that signature with your breathing pattern, just like a beat in a musical, musical song, if you could get the beat right and the timing right of your breathing in association with what you're doing and where you're going and who you are in that moment, then you're going to find that not only can the activity or the movement or the exercise be effortless, but it can be so enjoyable that you can reach a state of bliss doing it. So runners call this the runner's high. All right, athletes call this the flow state. And there's lots of stuff that you can read about and look at on how to get into the flow state. But this, guys, is key. If you can find the right breath pattern and the right gear to breathe in and get everything lined up mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, then and the breath ties it all together, by the way, until you reach those really high states, and you start experiencing bliss. And then, as Dan Winters would say, you don't need to breathe when you're in bliss because you're in no time. And he's got the science go into that in a way much better than I ever could. If you can find the key to the breath in that particular situation, then you're going to seek out, you're going to find that you get a lot more enjoyment out of everything you do. So there's one more story, and then I'll wrap it up. And then in Q&A we can bring it up and we can practice and we can get deeper into things. And I can, maybe give you some tips on the breath, and you can share the screen with me. I can see how you're breathing, and we can break things down into smaller components to practice. But I got called out to do a workshop for a bunch of ladies who were in the fitness area, who were 100 kilo plus. They were all getting together to, lose weight. And of course, they're carrying a lot of weight around. But a lot of them were very strong. And so what they were doing is they wanted to get their fitness up, so they could train longer and they could get the weight off quicker. Makes sense, right? Their biggest thing was like they could do all the exercises, they'd worked out their weights, but they were just running out of gas. They were just, because they were under a lot more strain than most people, they weren't quite able to sustain the time frames that they needed to really burn up that fat and get the weight down and hit their goals. So I worked with them on breathing patterns and breath gearing. Obviously, as the first thing that we went into is breathing. Key. Breathing in everything you do, every thought you do, every emotion you do, every action you do, wherever you are. Breathing, 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 breathing. Even underwater, you're holding your breath. You need to prepare for that breath hold. You need to recover from the breath hold. Okay, really important. And so we got into a very basic exercise. This is one you can practice right now, every day, wherever you go, from work, walking to and from work, wherever, okay, is that when you're taking a step, you work on different breath patterns. Okay, so it could be in breath, out breath, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or it can be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, in, 2. Okay, just like when you're swimming, breaststroke. Breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, you get the idea. And what we do is we'd work out what pattern felt most comfortable under the level of stress that we were under. If we're just walking normally, it might be 2, 3, in for 2, out for 3, or in for 3, out for 2. Okay, or if you're been during your workout, you're at the end of your workout and you're a bit more stressed, it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you've got to work out what the breath pattern is. Now that's just with walking. You can do it with running, you can do it with weights, you can do it with swimming, you can do it with cycling, you can do it with everything and anything. Just need to find the right breathing pattern. And once you've found that breathing pattern, and it's not necessarily the right breathing pattern universal, it's a right breathing pattern for you, for the activity, in the time space that you're in accordance to the direction or goal you're going in. Okay, so when you've got that worked out, and it's not something you need to really think about, it's something you have to feel your way through, that's going to reduce your stress and turn the volume down on all sorts of things that used to get up your goat and used to stress you out, used to piss you off. Okay, those things used to upset you. Those things. Taking a nice deep breath. When the motions are out of control, it's not working, go into a burst breath. And if it's too much, get rid of it, okay? And restore yourself as quickly as you can. Bring the brain out of a high beta survival frequency, fight, flight, freeze. Snap it out of that by lowering the blood, the heartbeat. Bring the heartbeat down. Calm the mind, calm the body, calm the energy. Restore yourself. Bring yourself back to neutral. And then you can go again. Now, really advanced methods of this that can be done. They taught this to elite soldiers back during the Cold War. This is how it came out with Systema. Is that after getting much feedback and doing a lot of testing, they found that soldiers who had heart rate went over a certain amount of beats per minute, I think it was something like 200, went into high stress state, some went into shock, some lost motor control over their bowels, and their bowels would evacuate, and their bladders would empty, and they'd lose their faculties, they'd lose their ability to think rationally, logically. And so they found that doing square breathing or triangle breathing, or what's called tactical breathing, would be enough to bring the heart rate down just enough so they may be able to get through those stressful situations. And this is another basic technique. It's really simple. You do this inside your mind, but it looks like this. If it's a square breath, it's in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out, hold. Triangle, in, hold, out, hold, in, hold, out, hold. Okay, really simple stuff, but profound. Okay, so deep in its application and its efficacy. All right, guys. So that's it for today. I hope that gives you some insight. I hope it gives you a few things you can practice. I hope you practice it, because after we get into the breath next week, we start really hitting those high velocities of, imploding that energy and getting fractal. You're going to want to have some handles when you get into the unknown, and breathing is a great handle. So practice as many breath patterns as you can, practice it as often as you can, and when things get a bit hairy, things get a bit out of control, things go a little bit turbo, you'll be able to ride the wave, because you'll know that you can, bring it back to neutral eventually, if not immediately. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope to see you all very soon in the Q&As and the next training session. And be kind and gentle-hearted to yourself. Take it easy. It's infinite, remember. It never ends. So just go at your own pace, in your own way. And if you need help, if you're freaking out, if things aren't working the way you expected, reach out, get support. Don't suffer in silence, okay? Because that's not what it's about. It should be enjoyable, it should be fun, you should be having incredible, beautiful, blissful experiences. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.